All right, let's work on the Unit 9 review sheet. It starts here with Pythagorean theorem, and you're checking to see if the triangle is right, acute, or obtuse. And so remember that Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And so if that is true, then it's a right triangle. If when you do it, the a square side ends up being bigger, so we say this side here is greater than. If the a square side is bigger, then it's an acute triangle, a to a. All right? And if the c square side is larger, so it would be greater than over there, the a square side is less than, then we say it is obtuse. And so for A, B, C, and D, you would just check that. And let's do a couple of these together just to check it out here. And so let's zoom in and try number 1A. And so you have root 3 squared plus root 4 squared equals root 5 squared. And a square root and a squared cancel each other out. That's the whole point of the square root, or the radical sign. And so this just becomes 3 plus 4. And this just becomes 5. And we know they're not equal. I'm going to put equal sign one more time there. But we know they're not equal. We know that indeed this side is bigger, or the a square side is bigger. And so the answer here is that it is an acute triangle. If we do the same thing with part C here, I would do 8 squared plus 15 squared. That was terrible handwriting, so let me try that part again. Plus 15 squared equals 17 squared. We get 64 plus 225 equals 289. And indeed, 289 is what those add up to, so 289 does equal 289. And because it is equal or true, we say it is a right triangle. And you would do the same thing on parts B and D. Okay. Zooming back out so I can go down to number 2. Number 2 is the same kind of thing here. It's doing a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And they just want you to look at that symbol there and that symbol there. All right, and so we're just following our rule from above. If the c square side is bigger, it is obtuse. If the a square side is bigger, it is acute. Numbers 3, 4, and 5. It's 3, all of them are 3, but 3A, 3B, and 3C. And I do believe this is all going to be a squared plus b squared equals c squared as well. And so it's important that we remember, how do we know what side is C? And above, I probably should have said it, the C is always the largest side. But that's also the hypotenuse. And so the hypotenuse, and we got pretty good at labeling the hypotenuse this unit, the hypotenuse is also the C. Okay? And so all of these problems, when I have a triangle, I want the hypotenuse to be C. Like for instance, in part B, I am only going to look at this triangle. Right, just this one triangle. It's a right triangle. This bottom is still 11 because the top was 11. But this over here would be my C because that is the hypotenuse. And the same thing down here, I would just look at this one triangle. And then this here would be my C because it's the hypotenuse. And so let's try a couple of these. Let's work a couple of these out and make sure that we know what we're doing. And I'll leave some for you as well. But let's zoom in real quick on 3A. On 3A, I would write it out as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we said 14 had to be the C. Which of the two, A or 12, had to be A? I mean, it's A, so it makes sense to put it in the A spot. But the legs do not matter. just the hypotenuse matters. The hypotenuse has to be c. Right? And so this gives me a squared plus 144 equals 196. We subtract 144 and we get 52. And then again, to get rid of that squared, we're going to do a square root. Those are what cancels out. All right, that radical sign when it's getting rid of the 2, which is a squared symbol, we call a square root. And so here our answer is going to be, and I do believe that we are following our base rule, which is rounding to the nearest hundredth, and so we would say 7.21. Going down to part C. And please feel free to pause this video at any point if you feel like I'm going too fast. The pause will help people write things down and help you process information. So in number C here, I want to do a squared plus b squared equals c squared again. And I want to do 4 squared plus 13 squared equals a squared. But you could do 13 squared plus 4 squared. That part doesn't matter. You could also, some people get really confused that this is an a out here. I hate when they do that. So you could just put an x here and call this x squared. 16 plus 169 equals a squared. And if you don't know those squares, that's fine. Use your calculator. 4 squared plus 13 squared. You might just want to type in like that, 4 squared plus 13 squared, and it would tell you that that's 185. You could kind of skip a step of work if you did it in a calculator that way. And then you do need to remember that at this point you need to do that square root. And so type that square root of 185 in your calculator. All right, and we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. This one ends up being kind of strange for nearest hundredth because it's 13.60. Number 4, during a storm, a tree breaks 5 feet above the ground and falls to form a right triangle. So we know right now this is 5 feet above the ground. If the top of the tree rests 20 feet, the top of the tree rests 20 feet from the base of the tree. So the top of the tree is right here, the base is back here, and so this right here is our 20 feet. Okay. Approximately how tall was the tree before the storm? Well, this is a right triangle, so you might already be going, okay, I'll throw an x there and do a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you're not wrong. But make sure you know what the question's asking. The question is asking how tall was the tree before the storm? Well, the whole tree before the storm was this whole part and this whole part. So for my total tree, I need to do 5 plus x. And so first let's figure out x. I want to do 5 squared plus 20 squared equals x squared. And again, you might just want to type 5 squared plus 20 squared in a calculator, and you get that 425. And now we need to square root both sides, so we do that. And we get that x is, and our default is rounding to the nearest couple decimal places here. And I just wrote down 20.6, so I'm missing something. But this one does say round to the nearest foot. And so when I do 5 plus 20.6, I can say that that does equal 25.6, but that's about 26 feet. And we're going to round this one, at least this says to round to the nearest whole foot. So we should probably do that. Couple more. So I'm going to go ahead and do those. 12 and 13 here are made up problems to help because they're problems you can do 2 different ways. Oops. Like this is a 45, 45, 90. And so you can totally use that shortcut of 45, 45, 90. All right. That's x root 2 to do this problem. However, if you don't remember that, you still need to use SOHCAHTOA. All right, for SOHCAHTOA, pick a 45. Either 45 matters, it doesn't matter, or you can use, it doesn't matter which one. I want to pick this one. I'm just going to ignore that one. You pick the 45. Does not matter which 45 you use. All right? So if I use that 45, well, this side's my H. This side becomes my adjacent, and so this would be a CA problem. So I can do it either way. I should get an equivalent answer. I won't say same, but equivalent answer means they work out the same. Right? And so if I keep doing, I want to keep doing the cosine way. Cosine 45 equals 9 over x. X is on bottom, means I do 9 divided by cosine 45. And I get 12.73, which is right. If I go back and do this shortcut method, the 45s match up with the 9 here. And so this is 9, this is 9, this is 9 root 2. 9 root 2 is the same exact thing as 12.73. So both answers are right. Either answer is right, maybe the way to say that. You could do it either way. Same thing for the next problem I just created. Again, this is just extra review, right? This is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So if you remember that shortcut, we can absolutely use that shortcut. X root 3, 2x, right? And if we don't, then we got to use SOHCAHTOA. And so this is our angle, this is the hypotenuse, this is the opposite, so this would be a SO problem. Right? This time I'll do the shortcut way first. This is 24. Working all the way back to the beginning means I divide by 2 because it was 2x. So I divide by 2, and that makes this 12, and this 12 root 3. This is across from the 60, so 12 root 3 is my answer. Right? If I do it so, sin 60 equals opposite over hypotenuse, x over 24. We times by 24, 24 times sin 60. And now you just type that into your calculator, making sure your calculator is in that degree mode. And you get 20.78. And that is every bit as good an answer to this problem.